Hello and welcome to Chapter 11, Collaborative Communication. I'm joined today by Dr. Helen Kelly, former primary principal at Canadian International School of Hong Kong. Congratulations on moving on in your career. And Helen, if you could, I would appreciate a little bit of an introduction about yourself and how it relates to today's topic.
Sure. So my first career actually wasn't in education. I was a lawyer for 10 years before I came into education. So I have a background in something else, which I find is often helpful. And then my career in education has been entirely in international schools. So I've been in international schools for 21 years, and for 15 of those years I've been a principal. First of all in Bangkok, and then in Berlin, and just finished today, literally retired today from CDNIS as the lower school principal there. I think that I've really built my career over the last few years around teacher and school leader well-being. The subject of my doctoral thesis was focused very much on the well-being and stress levels of international school leaders. And so it's that kind of emotional side of things that I'm interested in the most.
Great, and we're going to be getting into that topic today with a few of our questions, or a couple of our questions. But I kind of want to start with a really broad question first, and that's really kind of, through your eyes, what is communicating collaboratively, and how do we ensure that this form of communication leads to positive impacts in teaching and learning?
Yeah, I think that collaborative communication is really about when every single member of a team feels seen and heard and valued. So they need to feel seen in the sense that everything that they've achieved and all their experience is acknowledged by their colleagues within the team. To feel heard, so that their opinions and their ideas are taken seriously and considered by their teammates, and then to be valued for everything that they bring to the table. And I'll talk a bit later about the intertwining of teachers' professional and personal identity, but it isn't just about being valued professionally, but being valued personally as an individual. And I think the goal really, isn't it, for teaching and learning, is to have approaches to learning that you've developed as a team, implemented in every classroom, across a grade level or across a team. And that's really only going to happen if everyone's on the same page and everyone feels that they are seen and heard and valued. Because if everyone doesn't feel seen and heard and valued, then two things can happen. One is that conflict can arise, and we'll talk about that a bit later. And that, conflict's bad, no one wants that, but probably worse than conflict is that individuals within a team may just nod and agree and smile and say, yes, I'm going to do that. And then they'll go into their own classroom and shut the door and do something completely different. And so collaborative communication is all about seeing and hearing and valuing the individuals in a team to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as teachers, we all see ourselves as professionals. We're colleagues. It's a very egalitarian profession in the sense that we all see ourselves as equal. And in the same light, if we are all equal, if we are all professionals and we all want to achieve and realize the same goal for improving teaching and learning, why should any conversation ever be difficult?
Yeah, I love this question. This is big. I think that in order to understand why conversations can so often be difficult, you really need to understand something about human nature. You need to understand something about the nature of schools, and you need to understand something about the nature of teachers. So let's start with the big picture first, human nature. Our human brain hasn't really evolved that much in the last 100,000 years. So actually we still have the same brain that we had when we were dwelling in caves. And that brain means that we're actually hardwired for negativity. We're hardwired to experience anxiety and fear when we're under threat, because when we lived in the caves, that was what kept us alive. And because our brain hasn't evolved much since then, that's who we still are. We experience anxiety and fear much more significantly than we experience positive emotions. And so when we perceive that someone's threatening us, they're not taking us seriously or not listening to us, it creates this enormous amount of emotion, negative emotion, anxiety and fear inside of us. And what we do as humans, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this, is that we go over and over and over it in our minds, and we create this mini movie until we've blown it up out of all proportion. And so you need to understand that underlying kind of foundation of human nature first. And then I think you need to understand that schools are emotional arenas. In schools, we are responsible as adults for taking care of young people and children, for looking after their emotional needs. And as a consequence, it means that a school itself is a very emotional place, and teachers are themselves emotional individuals. They have, by their very nature, chosen to become the people who care for others. And that means it requires a very special kind of person to become a teacher, especially teachers of the youngest children. And I know that many principals say to me that the younger the child that they teach, the more challenging and emotional the individuals are to deal with. So we need these people, they're special people, but the converse of that is that they can be challenging to deal with. And what can often happen is that when someone feels undervalued and conflict arises, emotions come to the surface very quickly, and situations can escalate much more quickly than they would maybe in a corporate environment. And then I think the third thing is understanding more about the nature of teachers, is that research shows that with teachers, the professional identity and the personal identity is much more closely intertwined. And so when you disagree with someone's approach to their classroom or to learning, or conflict arises relating to something that you may think is just professional, many teachers will take that personally. And so if we bring all of that together, we've got a situation where teachers are often highly sensitive individuals. They need to be in order to do their job properly. And that therefore means when we're involved in what some of us may feel are professional conversations about learning, there's a whole bunch of baggage and challenges that come with that. And we can only really deal with that effectively if we understand that this is all underpinned by human nature, the nature of schools and the nature of teachers.
Wow, that was really powerful. You know, I'm going to test your theory here now, and with a dilemma that I'm often asked in my workshops, and I struggle to answer because to me, there's just so many different issues that are wrapped around it, and it just never seems like there's an easy answer to this question. But something that a lot of middle leaders deal with is they have two team members that just aren't getting along. They aren't collaborating. What can we recommend or suggest to this middle leader to help them address that?
Yeah, there's no quick fix. And if you think that you fixed it quickly, you probably haven't fixed it at all. You know, you probably have people just going into their classrooms and shutting the door and getting on with it, but not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or pretending that they're getting on, but they're not, or getting on temporarily, and then it will flare back up again at some time in the future. So in order to address this, I think really it comes down to the team leader. First of all, demonstrating their own vulnerability and leaning into the discomfort. You know, I'm a big fan of Brené Brown, and her book, Dare to Lead, I think can teach people a lot. So I think, first of all, you need to acknowledge as the team leader within the team environment what your role is in this conflict having arisen. Because if a conflict arises between two teachers, let's be honest, you're not doing your job properly, because you shouldn't have let that happen in the first place. I know that sounds harsh, but the solution comes from this self-awareness and acknowledging your own vulnerabilities as a leader. So I think the best way to tackle this is in two ways. First of all, in the team environment itself, it's being able to lean into the discomfort, to acknowledge that there is a conflict or an issue, and then to make yourself vulnerable as the leader to the other team members. So to say to them, guys, I know that things haven't gone very well, there's a conflict. No naming and shaming or calling out, because that makes people more threatened and that makes them more anxious, and that doesn't solve things. But just to be honest and say, you know, I got home on Friday night and this was really stressing me out, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it all weekend. And I think that maybe in that meeting 3 weeks ago, I realized then something needed to be done, but I wimped out. And if I'd been a stronger leader then, and I'd enabled us to deal with it, maybe we wouldn't have got to where we are now. And by being vulnerable to your team members, it opens the door for them to be vulnerable as well. And I think that that's the key. I also think speaking with the individual, you know, you should get to know your team as a team, but you should get to know the individuals as well. And what you really need to understand is what motivates them and what is it that makes them feel anxious and fearful. What's happened in their past or what's going on in their lives now that might make them react to certain situations in a certain way. And by doing that, you build trust. But I think that you can't be vulnerable as an individual or expect other people to own up to their own vulnerabilities without self-awareness. And self-awareness is everything in life, not just at work. And so I think it's about being prepared to do that work yourself, to understand who you are as a professional and as a person, what motivates you, but also what pushes your buttons. And then trying to understand others in the same way. And I think tools that we've used together, such as the DISC, are a really good starting point with that. You know, it helps you to develop self-awareness about your own characteristics, but also helps team members to understand what each other's characteristics are. And what you're aiming for is to develop an environment within your team meetings and within the team generally, where people can open up and be vulnerable about what's bothering them. And key to that, and something you and I have talked about over the years, is trying to keep those teams together for at least 3 years. Because when you keep a team together over a period of time, they do develop that awareness of each other, and they do, trust builds up, and they are able to make themselves vulnerable. And over time, that means that these conflicts don't arise, or when they do, when people feel undervalued, or they feel that they're being personally attacked, they can open up and address it by leaning into that vulnerability. And I think that any other way is really just sticking a Band-Aid, you know, on. It isn't really getting to the kind of heart of the problem. So that's what I recommend, but it's not easy, is it? That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, no, you're right. There is no like Band-Aid. There is no quick solution to it. And in fact, leadership at this level is a full-time job. And we have to appreciate that our teacher leaders are in the classroom as well. So they have to appreciate this part of the leadership. They have to, what I would recommend, delegate away that supervision, that administrative tasks, focus on those people, because everything that you've just recommended right now, that's a full-time preoccupation.
I completely agree. You know, one of the things that I say to people in my own middle leader workshops is that sometimes we think that the people work is what takes us away from the real work, but the people work is the real work. If you don't get the people work right, then nothing will come right. And so you're right, it's about delegating all of that other stuff as a middle leader, like booking field trips and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. To others, so that you can be there to attend to the people work. And it takes a special individual to be able to attend to that and it not take its toll. You know, it takes its toll on you emotionally as a leader at a middle and senior level, dealing with all of these emotions of others. I say in my own research that the school leader is the conduit through which the emotions of everyone else runs. And that takes its toll. So it's very, very important to develop that self-awareness, but also to make sure that you take care of yourself. Because to quote a colleague of mine, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Wow. again, really powerful sentiment. I'm going to end on the fact that the people work is the real work. Thank you for sharing that with us and your insights. I look forward to having many more conversations with you in the future. And again, just a thank you from myself and our audience.
Thanks, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure.